He is the most feared man in Seoul, a stone-cold billionaire with a heart made of ice. But tonight, at the most expensive gala in Manhattan, the powerful Jin-hoon is being torn down by his own enemies while the world laughs. Just as he prepares to lose everything, a hand reaches out, not from a bodyguard or a diplomat, but from a quiet, hard-working waitress named Nia who has been invisible all night. She is about to do something so brave it will change both of their lives forever. You are not going to believe how this night ends. Subscribe now and watch until the very end, because every minute counts in this story of power, respect, and a love that shouldn't exist. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was filled with the smell of expensive perfume and old money. Jin-hoon sat at the head table, his suit costing more than most people make in a year. He was there to sign a massive deal, but he didn't realize it was a trap. Across from him, a rival businessman began to mock Jin-hoon's family history in front of the elite crowd. The room went silent as the insults got personal and cruel. Jin-hoon squeezed his glass so hard his knuckles turned white, but he couldn't react without losing the deal. Nia moved through the crowd with a silver tray, keeping her head down. She worked 3 jobs to pay for her mother's medical bills and knew exactly what it felt like to be looked down upon. She watched as the men at the table poured wine onto Jin-hoon's expensive shoes, laughing like schoolyard bullies. The guards stood by, frozen, because they were paid to protect his body, not his dignity. Jin-hoon looked down, the shame burning a hole in his chest. He felt completely alone in a room full of 1,000 people. The main antagonist, a man named Sterling, stood up and announced that Jin-hoon was nothing but a glorified street thug. He grabbed a bowl of cold soup and prepared to dump it over Jin-hoon's head to finish the humiliation. The cameras were out, ready to capture the fall of the Korean titan. Nia felt a spark of anger she had never felt before. She knew she would lose her job, but she couldn't watch another person be destroyed for sport. She stepped forward, her heart drumming against her ribs. Just as the soup began to tilt, Nia stumbled, on purpose. She crashed into Sterling, causing the liquid to soak his own white tuxedo instead. The room gasped as the bully screamed in shock. Nia immediately dropped to her knees, pretending to be clumsy, and began wiping the floor near Jin-hoon's feet. Under her breath, so only he could hear, she whispered, "Don't let them see you blink." It was the first time anyone had spoken to him as a human being all night. Sterling was furious and raised his hand to strike Nia for her mistake. Jin-hoon stood up, his height towering over everyone, and caught Sterling's wrist mid-air. The air in the room turned freezing cold. Jin-hoon didn't look at his rival. He looked down at the small woman who had just risked everything for him. He realized she wasn't just a waitress. She was the only person in the room with real courage. He told Sterling the deal was off and he would buy his company just to burn it down. Jin-hoon took Nia's hand and pulled her up from the floor. He didn't care about the wine on his shoes or the whispers of the elite. He walked her out of the ballroom while the cameras flashed, leaving the rich bullies in total silence. Outside in the cool night air, he asked her why she did it. Nia looked him in the eye and said she hated seeing someone's spirit get stepped on. Jin-hoon realized his life of money and violence was empty compared to the heart of this stranger. He offered her a ride home in his black limousine, but she refused, saying she had to finish her shift. Jin-hoon watched her walk back into the hotel, her cheap uniform shoes clicking on the pavement. He told his driver to find out everything about her, but not for revenge. For the first time in 10 years, the ice boss felt a warmth in his chest. He knew his enemies would now come after her because she was his only weakness. He vowed to become her silent shadow, protecting her from the shadows. Nia woke up the next morning in her cramped apartment, worrying about her fired status. To her surprise, her manager called and told her she had been promoted to head of service with a massive raise. She didn't know Jin-hoon had bought the entire catering company overnight. She went to work feeling a sense of relief, but she also felt like someone was watching her. Everywhere she went, a black SUV stayed 2 blocks behind. She felt safe, Yet she knew her quiet life was over. In the dark corners of the city, Jin-hoon's enemies were plotting. They saw the footage of the waitress savior, and knew she was the key to breaking him. They sent men to her apartment to send a message. Jin-hoon was already there, waiting in the hallway in the dark. He handled the intruders quietly, without Nia ever knowing they were there. He wanted to keep her hands clean of his world. He sat on the stairs outside her door all night, guarding her sleep. Nia started finding small gifts at her doorstep. Medicine for her mother, comfortable shoes for work, and fresh flowers. There were no notes, but she knew who they were from. She felt a strange connection to the man from the party. She decided to go to his office to tell him he didn't owe her anything. When she arrived at the massive glass skyscraper, the security guards bowed to her. They had orders to treat her like royalty. She found Jin-hoon in a room full of monitors, looking exhausted. He looked up, and his cold eyes softened the moment he saw her. Nia told him that she didn't want his money or his protection. She wanted to know why a man so powerful felt so small at that party. Jin-hoon confessed that he had spent his life building walls, and she was the first person to climb over them. They sat on the floor of his office, eating cheap takeout, and for an hour the Mafia Boss was just a man. The peace didn't last long. A sniper's red dot appeared on the wall behind Nia's head. Jin-hoon tackled her to the floor just as the glass shattered. He held her tight, shielding her body with his own. He realized that by being near her, he was putting her in more danger than ever before. He had to make a choice. Push her away to keep her safe, or bring her into his world and teach her how to fight. Nia was shaking, but she didn't cry. She looked at the blood on Jin-hoon's arm where a glass shard had hit him. Instead of running away, she tore a strip from her shirt and tied it around his wound. She told him she wasn't afraid of the monsters because she had already lived through a hard life. This moment changed Jin-hoon's plan. He wouldn't hide her. He would make her the queen of his empire. He took her to a hidden underground training facility. He showed her his world, the maps, the money, and the weapons. He told her that if she stayed with him, she would never be just a waitress again. Nia looked at the monitors and saw the faces of the men who tried to hurt her. She realized that she had a power Jin-hoon didn't. She could see people for who they really were. She agreed to stay, but only if they did things her way. Nia began her new life not in a silk dress, but in a room full of data. Jin-hoon realized she had a photographic memory for faces, a skill she developed while serving thousands of customers. He sat her down in front of his security feeds and asked her to point out anyone who looked out of place. She quickly identified 3 of his top guards who were secretly meeting with his rivals in the parking garage. Jin-hoon was stunned because these were men he had trusted for a decade. He realized that Nia was his secret weapon because she noticed the small details everyone else ignored. The tension in the mansion grew as Jin-hoon began to purge his inner circle based on Nia's observations. He didn't use violence. He used the information she gathered to bankrupt them and send them into exile. The other mafia bosses started to whisper about the ghost of Seoul, who was dismantling their spies. They didn't know it was a soft-spoken waitress in an oversized hoodie. During these long nights, Jin-hoon and Nia shared coffee in the kitchen, talking about their childhoods. He learned about her father's struggle, and she learned about the loneliness of being a king. One night, while Jin-hoon was sleeping, Nia saw a shadow on the balcony of his bedroom. Instead of screaming, she grabbed a heavy brass lamp and waited behind the curtain. When the assassin stepped inside, she didn't hesitate. She tripped him and pinned his arm until the real guards arrived. Jin-hoon woke up to find her standing over a professional killer, her hands shaking but her gaze steady. He realized then that she wasn't just a girl he was protecting. She was his partner in every sense. The rival families decided to hold a peace summit at a neutral location, a remote mountain estate. They demanded Jin-hoon bring the woman who had caused so much trouble. He didn't want to take her, but Nia insisted, saying she wouldn't hide in a golden cage. He bought her a dress that looked like midnight, and he wore a tie that matched her color. They walked into the summit like a king and queen, but the air was thick with the scent of an impending trap. At the summit, the elders of the Korean underworld tried to belittle Nia again. They laughed at her background and called her a distraction for Jin-hoon. Nia didn't get angry this time. She pulled out a tablet and showed them bank records she had found through Jin-hoon's hackers. She proved that the elders were stealing from each other's pension funds. The laughter stopped instantly. The elders looked at each other with suspicion, and the alliance against Jin-hoon crumbled right there at the dinner table. As they drove back, Jin-hoon took Nia's hand in the car. He told her she was more dangerous than any soldier he had ever hired. Nia confessed that she was scared, but she was more afraid of losing the only person who truly saw her. They shared a quiet, tender moment as the city lights blurred past. But as they pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. The power had been cut, and the front door was hanging off its hinges. Jin-hoon pushed Nia behind him and drew his weapon. They entered the foyer to find a single cell phone ringing on the floor. Jin-hoon picked it up, and a voice told him they had kidnapped Nia's mother from her hospital bed. The voice gave him an ultimatum: give up his entire empire by dawn, or he would never see the old woman again. Nia collapsed to her knees, the weight of the danger finally breaking her spirit. Jin-hoon looked at her and made a silent vow to burn the world down to bring her mother back. Jin-hoon didn't call his lawyers or his accountants. He called his cleaners. He told Nia to stay at the safe house, but she refused to let him go alone. She knew the layout of the hospital where her mother was taken, and realized the kidnappers had used a specific delivery van she recognized from her old job. This small clue led them to a warehouse district by the docks. Jin-hoon was impressed by her mental strength, even while her heart was breaking. They moved through the city like shadows, fueled by a mix of desperation and cold fury. Inside the warehouse, Sterling, the man from the party, was waiting. He had lost everything because of Jin-hoon and Nia, and he wanted blood. He had Nia's mother tied to a chair in the middle of a cold room. Sterling mocked Jin-hoon for falling in love with a nobody. Jin-hoon stepped into the light, dropping his gun to show he was willing to negotiate. He offered Sterling his entire bank account access in exchange for the two women. Sterling laughed, saying he wanted Jin-hoon to watch them suffer first. While Sterling was distracted by his own ego, Nia was crawling through the overhead ventilation shafts. She had remembered the building's blueprints from her time working for the catering company that served this district. She dropped down behind her mother and quietly began cutting the ropes with a shard of glass. Her heart was pounding so loud she thought the guards would hear it. Below her, Jin-hoon was taking a beating from Sterling's men to keep their eyes on him and away from the shadows. Nia managed to free her mother and signaled to Jin-hoon using a small flashlight. The moment he saw the light, Jin-hoon's demeanor changed from victim to predator. He took down the three guards nearest to him in a matter of seconds. Sterling tried to run, but Jin-hoon caught him by the collar. He didn't kill him. He did something worse. He handed him over to the very elders Sterling had been stealing from. He knew the underworld would handle the traitor far more cruelly than he ever could. They got Nia's mother to a private clinic owned by Jin-hoon's family. The doctors promised she would be safe and given the best care in the world. Nia sat in the waiting room, covered in dust and grease, finally letting the tears fall. Jin-hoon sat next to her and put his arm around her. He told her that he was done with the mafia life. He wanted to use his billions to build something real, something she could be proud of. He realized that the ice boss died in that warehouse, and a new man was born. However, the shadows of the past are hard to escape. A high-ranking official who had been on Jin-hoon's payroll for years felt threatened by this change of heart. He knew that if Jin-hoon went clean, all the dirty secrets would come out. The official ordered a final strike, not just on Jin-hoon, but on everyone he cared about. While they were at the clinic, a fleet of black cars surrounded the building. This wasn't a kidnapping attempt anymore. It was a total wipeout mission. Jin-hoon realized they were trapped. He looked at Nia and told her he loved her for the first time. He gave her a key to a safe deposit box in Switzerland and told her to take her mother and run through the secret exit. Nia looked at the key and then looked at him. She realized he was planning to sacrifice himself to hold the front line. She grabbed his jacket and told him that they started this together, and they would finish it together. She had one last plan that didn't involve guns. Nia used the hospital's intercom system to broadcast a live stream to every major news outlet in the country. She had recorded the entire conversation with Sterling and the elders at the mountain summit, using a hidden microphone in her dress. She hit send on the file, exposing the entire web of corruption, including the names of the police and politicians involved. The black cars outside stopped in their tracks as their phones began to blow up with alerts. The hunters were suddenly the most wanted men in the nation. The police sirens began to wail in the distance, but these were the honest cops who hadn't been bought. The corrupt officials fled, knowing their careers and lives were over. The siege on the clinic ended without a single shot being fired. Jin-hoon watched the monitors in disbelief. He had spent his life using force to solve problems, while Nia used the truth. He realized that her mind was more powerful than any army he had ever led. The world was watching, and for the first time, Jin-hoon felt free. In the aftermath, the Korean Mafia was dismantled by the federal government. Jin-hoon turned state's evidence, using his knowledge to clean up the streets he once controlled. Because of his cooperation and Nia's evidence, he was granted immunity but had to forfeit his illegal fortune. He didn't care. He still had enough legal investments to start over. He bought a small, quiet house by the ocean, far away from the skyscrapers and the violence of his old life. Nia's mother fully recovered and moved in with them. She finally had the life Nia had always dreamed of giving her. The story of the waitress and the boss became a legend in the city, a reminder that dignity can't be bought and that the most invisible people are often the most powerful. Nia went back to school to become a lawyer, wanting to help people who were being bullied just like Jin-hoon was at that party. She was no longer the girl with the tray. She was the woman with the gavel. One evening, Jin-hoon and Nia walked along the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He asked her if she ever regretted stepping in that night at the gala. Nia smiled and said it was the best mistake she ever made. He pulled a small box from his pocket. It wasn't a diamond from his Mafia days, but a simple band she had admired in a shop window months ago. He asked her to stay by his side forever, not as his protector, but as his wife. She said yes, and for the first time in the entire story, the camera showed a genuine happy smile on Jin-hoon's face. They weren't looking over their shoulders anymore. The past was buried, and the future was wide open. They had proven that even in a world of monsters, a little bit of kindness and a lot of courage could change everything. The screen fades to black as they walk toward their home, two people who found light in the darkest of places. Just like Nia, one small act of bravery can start a landslide of change. Thank you for watching this journey until the very end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of heart, power, and the strength of the human spirit. Your support means the world to us.